Little House on the Prairie is a reminder of when things were simpler for us in our lives those 45 years ago.
For decades, one question quietly haunted the fans of one of America's most beloved television shows. Was it real? Two people, two characters, one unforgettable love story played out week after week on primetime television, and the world never quite stopped wondering whether what they were seeing went deeper than the script. Melissa Gilbert and Dean Butler. Laura Ingalls and Almanzo Wilder. The girl with the braids and the steady, quiet man who won her heart on screen. Fans wrote letters about them. Magazines speculated about them. And through all of it, both actors stayed remarkably, almost suspiciously, quiet. That silence lasted for years. And then, slowly, carefully, Melissa Gilbert began to speak. What she revealed didn't come with dramatic headlines or a shocking press conference. It came through her memoir, through honest interviews, and through the kind of candid reflection that only arrives after a person has truly made peace with their past. And what she said changed the way many people understood not just that television romance, but Melissa herself, who she really was behind those famous braids, what she was going through during those years on set, and why that on-screen chemistry with Dean Butler looked so devastatingly convincing even when the reality behind it was something far more complicated. This is the story she finally decided to tell. To understand why this story matters, you have to go back to the show itself. Little House on the Prairie was not just a television program. For millions of American families throughout the 1970s and into the 1980s, it was a weekly ritual. Based on the beloved book series by Laura Ingalls Wilder, the NBC drama followed the Ingalls family as they carved out a life on the Minnesota frontier, facing poverty, illness, loss, and hardship with a kind of grace and determination that felt both aspirational and deeply human. At the center of it all was young Laura Ingalls, played by Melissa Gilbert, who first stepped into that role at just 9 years old. She was not a polished, manufactured child star. She was something rarer, a completely natural presence on screen. Audiences did not feel like they were watching a performance. They felt like they were watching a real girl grow up, which, in many ways, is exactly what they were doing. As the seasons progressed and Melissa grew from a little girl into a teenager, the show grew with her. Laura's storylines evolved. She fell in love. And the writers introduced the character who would become the other half of one of television's most enduring romances, Almanzo Wilder, a calm, hard-working, and quietly devoted young man from a neighboring town. When actor Dean Butler arrived on set to bring Almanzo to life, something clicked on screen almost immediately. The way Laura looked at Almanzo. The way he looked back. Fans felt it from the very first episode. The letters poured in. The questions started. And neither Melissa nor Dean said very much about any of it for a very long time. Before we can understand what Melissa has finally revealed about Dean Butler, it is worth understanding who Melissa Gilbert really was during those years, because her true story is considerably more layered than the sun-drenched, wholesome image the show projected. Melissa was born on May 8, 1964, in Los Angeles, California. She was adopted just one day after birth by comedian and actor Paul Gilbert and his wife Barbara Crane, herself a performer. Growing up in a show business household meant that the world of cameras and auditions was simply part of Melissa's normal life from the very beginning. By the time she was 7, she was already appearing in commercials. By 9, she landed the audition that would define her career and, in many ways, her entire early life. What the public saw was a confident, spirited young actress thriving in a beloved role. What was actually happening was considerably more complex. Her parents' marriage ended in divorce. Her relationship with her adoptive father became distant. The set of Little House on the Prairie quietly became the most stable home she had, largely because of one person, Michael Landon, who played her on-screen father Charles Ingalls and became, by Melissa's own account, one of the most genuinely paternal presences in her real life as well. Landon was protective of Melissa in a way that went well beyond professional responsibility. He guided her, included her in his own family's life, and gave her a sense of being truly seen and cared for at a time when she badly needed it. Years later, Melissa has spoken about how deeply that relationship shaped her. It was real. It was the kind of bond that does not form on a script. But even with that anchor, growing up on a television set brought pressures that most people never have to face. Melissa could not simply be a teenager. She had to be Laura Ingalls, always, in every public moment, every interview, every fan encounter. The line between who she was and who the character was began to blur in confusing and painful ways. She has said in interviews that she spent much of her teenage years asking herself a question that should not have been so difficult: where does Laura end, and where do I begin? Then came the romance. And with it, a new kind of pressure entirely. When Dean Butler joined the cast as Almanzo Wilder, Melissa was 15 years old. Dean was 23. That 8-year gap was not hidden from anyone, but what was hidden, what Melissa kept private for decades, was just how uncomfortable and disorienting that on-screen romance felt from her side of the camera. In her memoir, Prairie Tale, published in 2009, Melissa was more honest about this period than she had ever been before. She wrote plainly about being a teenager who had not yet had a real boyfriend, who was still figuring out what attraction even felt like, and who was now expected to portray convincing romantic love on national television with an adult man. She described filming the early romantic scenes as stressful and strange. She has called their very first on-screen kiss, which aired to millions of viewers, genuinely terrifying. She was not being dramatic. She was a 15-year-old girl being asked to perform emotional and physical intimacy she had not yet experienced in her own life, under studio lights, with take after take until someone in a director's chair was satisfied. For anyone who has only ever seen the finished product, those scenes look effortless. That is a testament to how skilled both actors were. But Melissa has made clear that the ease viewers saw on screen bore little resemblance to what she was actually feeling. And here is the part that perhaps surprised fans most when she finally said it clearly and directly: there was never any romantic feeling between them off screen. None. At all. Melissa Gilbert has stated plainly, in multiple interviews and in her own written words, that her relationship with Dean Butler was never romantic. At the time they were filming those iconic scenes, her heart was somewhere else entirely. She was, by her own account, completely absorbed in her feelings for Rob Lowe, the young actor she would go on to date seriously in real life. Dean Butler was not her secret crush. He was not the man she thought about when she went home at the end of a filming day. We were never romantic, she has said. Dean was like a big brother to me. That is not the answer fans spent decades hoping to hear. But Melissa has never seemed particularly interested in telling people what they want to hear at the expense of the truth. And the truth, as she tells it, is that Dean Butler was something she perhaps values even more than a romantic partner from that era of her life. He was a genuinely decent, patient, and respectful professional who understood the awkwardness of the situation and never once made it worse. Dean himself has confirmed this characterization in his own interviews and in his book Prairie Man. He has spoken openly about being aware of the age gap and about taking his responsibilities seriously, not just as an actor but as someone who recognized that his co-star was a teenager navigating an unusual and emotionally complex situation. He said that Melissa was focused, talented, and brave, and that she made the work easy even when the circumstances were anything but. He has also acknowledged the intense pressure from the network and from an increasingly devoted fan base to make the romance look absolutely real, and he and Melissa delivered that, season after season, entirely through craft. What they had behind the scenes was not romance. It was mutual respect. It was professionalism. It was, over time, a genuine friendship built on shared experience and shared understanding. And if that seems like a smaller thing than what fans imagined, Melissa would probably disagree. Real friendship, honest and uncomplicated, is not a small thing. It is actually quite rare. When Little House on the Prairie ended, Melissa Gilbert faced the challenge that confronts nearly every actor who becomes famous in childhood. The world had already decided who she was, and it was reluctant to let her be anyone else. She fought hard against that limitation. She took on darker roles, more complex characters. She performed on Broadway. She did voice work in television movies that pushed her well outside the comfortable, familiar territory of Walnut Grove. She was determined to prove that she was more than pigtails and prairie dresses, and in many ways she succeeded, though not without significant personal cost. Her private life during those years was turbulent. A long, serious relationship with Rob Lowe. A marriage to actor Bo Brinkman that produced her son Dakota but ultimately ended in divorce. A later marriage to Bruce Boxleitner that also eventually dissolved. Through all of it, Melissa was remarkably public about her struggles in a way that many celebrities simply are not. She wrote honestly in Prairie Tale about addiction, about self-doubt, about the specific kind of disorientation that comes from spending your formative years being someone else for the entertainment of millions. She has also spoken candidly about the pressures of Hollywood's beauty standards and how deeply they affected her. At 18, she had rhinoplasty. Later, she got breast implants. She has been honest that these decisions came not purely from personal desire but from an industry culture that evaluates women primarily by how they look and whether they are aging in the approved direction. In 2015, she had her implants removed and stopped dyeing her hair. She called it one of the best decisions she had ever made. "I'm aging gracefully," she told Prevention magazine. "I want to see every line, every mark. It's part of who I am." The Melissa Gilbert of today bears only a passing resemblance to the carefully managed public image of her earlier years, and that appears to be entirely intentional. In 2013, she married actor Timothy Busfield, and by her own description, something genuinely settled in her life for the first time. They moved to the Catskills. They grow vegetables. They raise chickens. They live, by Hollywood standards, extraordinarily simply. Melissa has spoken about this choice with the kind of conviction that only comes from someone who has tried the alternative and found it hollow. She wanted simplicity. She wanted honesty. She wanted, in a sense, to finally live the values that Laura Ingalls represented on screen all those years ago, not for a camera, but for herself. Her 2022 memoir, Back to the Prairie, chronicles this return to a quieter, more grounded life and was received warmly by readers who had followed her story for decades. She has become an outspoken advocate on issues of mental health, body image, and the particular pressures placed on women in the entertainment industry. She speaks at events, engages genuinely with fans, and has cultivated a public presence that feels, for the first time in her life, entirely her own.